"Excuse me, are you even supposed to be here?" The words cracked like a whip through the summer stillness, cutting through the soft splash of the infinity pool and the hum of cicadas. Clinging to the cypress trees, she stood in stilettos by the edge of the water, her designer sunglasses sliding just enough to reveal a cold, unblinking stare. He blinked once, slowly. A tall black man, mid-50s, silver at his temples, a simple black robe tied around his waist, towel draped across his shoulder, the kind of calm that unsettles the rude. But she didn't care, or maybe she didn't think she had to. The villa behind him gleamed with white stone and glass. You could smell the rosemary from the hedge, the salt on his skin, the faint scent of aged leather from the lounge chairs. This wasn't a rental. This was home. Still, she stepped closer. "I'm calling security," she added, flipping her blonde hair over one shoulder. "You don't live here. I've been staying in that Airbnb across the hill all week. I know who owns this property." That's when he stood up, slowly, quietly. From his chair on the sun-warmed travertine tiles, he straightened all 6 feet of himself. No raised voice, no anger, just gravity. She reached for her phone. "I'm not joking. You're trespassing." In the distance, a gardener paused mid-trim. The pool cleaner's gaze flicked up, then quickly back down. A neighbor on her balcony across the fence narrowed her eyes. Something was shifting. He didn't answer. Not yet. He just looked at her and let the silence thicken like storm clouds over still water. She dialed anyway. "Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious man. He's refusing to leave the premises." He was still barefoot, towel damp. But his eyes, they weren't confused. They weren't scared. They were patient. "What would you have done?" Said nothing to keep the peace, or spoken up, knowing how it might end. Because that's the thing about being calm when someone's trying to humiliate you publicly. It makes them nervous, and she was starting to sweat under that perfect hair. He didn't move, not until the sound of tires crunched up the gravel drive 5 minutes later, and the officers stepped out of their cruiser. But that wasn't even the worst part, because what he said next, just 2 words, would change everything. "Let me take you back to how it all started." The cruiser door slammed. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting casually near their belts, eyes already scanning the scene. One was younger, barely 30, with a clipboard in hand. The other mid-40s, thick forearms, mirrored sunless spoke first. "Sir," he said, his voice low but direct, "we received a call about a possible trespasser." The woman in stilettos rushed forward, her voice turning urgent. "That's him. I told you. He doesn't live here. It was just lounging there like he owns the place." Her tone dripped with conviction, the kind that doesn't question itself. Her silk wrap fluttered as she gestured toward him, like she expected the officers to move now. But they didn't, not yet. The older officer turned to the man by the pool. "Can we see some ID?" He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached slowly for the towel draped over his chair. His movements were deliberate, measured, not because he was hiding anything, but because he knew what a sudden move could mean. He dried his palms first. Then, without a word, he walked past the woman low, instinctively took half a step back and stopped at the outdoor bar cart. There, tucked into the leather pouch beside his phone, was his wallet. He handed over his driver's license with 2 fingers, calm, silent, and yet inside, he felt it. Not fear, not exactly. It was that familiar pressure behind the ribs, that quiet echo that whispers, again, still. That voice that says, "You built this, brick by brick, and they still don't see you." The officer examined the license, then looked up. "Can you confirm the address on this, sir?" The man gestured with his chin toward the glass doors of the villa. "Front gate has the number. Mailbox 2. Feel free to check." But before the officer could move, the woman interrupted. "I don't care what it says," she snapped. "This place is worth millions." You think someone like she stopped herself, lips tightening. But the damage was done. The younger officer looked up from the clipboard. His eyes shifted bare-lipped. It was enough. And then a voice from across the fence called out. "He's lived there for years," said the neighbor. That's Mr. Cole. He owns the property. I've seen him every summer." Silence. The woman's expression cracked for the first time. Just slightly. Mr. Cole didn't turn. He didn't need to. He just looked at the officers and said, "Are we done?" That was it. 2 words. Calm. Final. The older officer nodded. "Yes, sir. Sorry for the trouble." They turned to leave. The woman stood frozen, lips parted, eyes darting. But Mr. Cole, he just walked back to his chair, sat down, and dipped his feet into the water like nothing happened. Almost, because something had shifted. And it wasn't just her. Stick around because next, I'll show you what happened when she refused to let it go. The officers were barely back in their cruiser when she snapped. "Oh, so now you're playing the victim," she said, voice loud enough to carry over the hedge. "I'm not the one pretending to live in a mansion I clearly can't afford." Mr. Cole didn't move, but the pool cleaner did. He looked up, fumbled with his net, then slowly back toward the side gate. The woman stepped closer again, heels ticking sharply on stone. Her tone had changed, yet no longer panic, just venomous, polished, performative. For the audience now gathering in whispers along the fence, one man muttered, "Geez, let it go." Another held up his phone. "I'm filming now. This is nuts." She glanced at the man, smiled. "That's right," she said, still facing Cole. "Let them see. Let them all see what entitlement looks like. Acting like you're somebody when you're clearly not." He stood again. Not fast, not angry, just steady. And suddenly it was quiet. Only the wind in the trees, the faint trickle from the edge of the infinity pool, the distant hum of the cruiser pulling away. Cole's voice, when it came, was low, controlled. "Are you done embarrassing yourself?" Her nostrils flared. "Excuse me." At that moment, a soft creak came from the glass door of the villa. A woman stepped out, mid-50s, hair in a low bun, crisp linen uniform. She carried a tray with a glass of lemon water and a cloth napkin. "Sir," she said gently, eyes down, "your usual." She placed the tray on the teak side table, gave a polite nod, and disappeared back inside. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The crowd murmured. One woman near the fence whispered, "He has staff." The young man filming whispered, "Yo, I think he's the actual owner." The woman's face reddened. "This is insane. You people always twist the story. You think just because someone brings you water." "Enough." His voice sliced through the heat like a blade. And this time, even she stopped. His hand rested on the towel, but his stance had changed. No longer just calm, now anchored, immovable. Inside, a part of him was boiling, not just because of her words, but because it was never just her. It was the pattern, the way the world pretended to smile but pulled out claws. When it thought no one of power was watching, she thought she could still win this. But she didn't know what was coming. If you'd like to support stories like this, consider subscribing. We've only just begun. Because before the sun even set that day, she would be the one asked to leave by someone she never saw coming. Before I tell you who walked in next, I know you might be busy. Maybe you've got errands to run, or maybe your mind can only handle so much drama at once. But if stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss how it all unfolds. Because what happened next? It changed everything. A black SUV rolled up the driveway, smooth, silent. The kind of vehicle that doesn't make a scene but everyone notices anyway. The crowd shifted. A few more phones rose, even the pool cleaner. Now watching from behind the head, stood a little straighter. The driver stepped out first, crisp suit, earpiece, clipboard tucked under one arm. He didn't look around, just opened the rear door. And out stepped a woman, tall, impeccable posture, late 40s, maybe 50s, skin like polished mahogany. A navy sheath dress that whispered power, not screamed it. She walked like someone used to marble boardrooms and double-locked doors. The blonde woman froze mid-sentence. "Miss Hill," she stammered. "Wait, Tanya Hill." The woman didn't answer. She looked directly at Mr. Cole. He gave a single nod. She walked past the stunned crowd, past the gate, and straight to him. "Marcus," she said, voice cool but warm. You left the board call early. I had company, he replied, just loud enough for everyone to hear. The blonde girl's jaw twitched. You to know each other. Tanya Hilturn. We serve on 3 executive boards together, she said flatly. Marcus is chair of 2 of them. And she glanced back at the villa. He built this house from scratch. What, exactly, did you think you were doing? The silence was brutal. The woman's face drained of color. But he was just by the pool. His pool, Tanya replied. On his land, in his home. And you called the police? There it was. The weight of it dropped like stone. People gasped. A few stepped back. One voice muttered, "Oh hell." And in the blonde girl's eyes you could see it, that flicker of realization. That sick sinking twist of ego folding in on itself. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He just said, "Thanks for coming, Tanya." She smiled. You always say no need to raise your voice when you own the building. But that building, it wasn't the only thing he owned. Stick around, because next, Marcus does something no one expected. And it doesn't involve lawyers. It involves justice. Real justice. Marcus stood quietly, watching the ripple of reactions pass through the crowd like wind over tall grass. He didn't smile, didn't move. He just let the weight of Tanya's words hang in the air, heavy and still. The blonde woman blinked rapidly, her voice cracking. I didn't know. I was just trying to protect. Protect who? Marcus said, finally. His tone was soft, but it hit like thunder. Yourself, your image, or the version of this world where people like me don't belong in places like this. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. He turned it to her but to the gate. A young man in a gray uniform had appeared. He wore a security badge, Cypress Hill Estates Neighborhood Patrol. In his hand, a small folder. "Mr. Cole," he said with a nod. "We've pulled footage from the community gate cameras. You're listed as the primary owner on the title deed for this parcel, of course. And your guests, staff, deliveries are pre-cleared." He paused. But this individual here, he gestured toward the blonde woman, entered through the South Service Road, jumped the guest registry. The girl's eyes widened. "That's not true. I walked through the park trail. There's no sign." Marcus raised a hand. "It doesn't matter." He turned to the guard. "She's not to be banned. Not yet." She looked up, startled. "Not yet." Instead, Marcus stepped toward the tray the housekeeper had left earlier. He lifted the lemon water, took one sip, then placed it down and picked up a second glass. This one wasn't chilled, wasn't even full. Just a half pour of something dark, complex, aged. He walked it to the woman. Her body tensed like she expected a lecture or a speech. But he didn't say a word. He simply held out the glass. Confused, she took it. "What is this?" she asked. He looked her dead in the eyes. "Redemption. Bitter. You'll want to sip slowly." She stared at it like it might burn her. And then, just when she thought the moment had passed, he added, "You said I was pretending." He took a step closer. But that chair he gestured behind him, to the lounge by the pool, was custom built. That tree he pointed up to the tall olive branch shading the stone walkway. "I planted it before the foundation was poured. And that fence, the one you leaned against while insulting me," he smiled. "I designed it to be soundproof, so guests like you wouldn't disturb the neighbors." The crowd let out a soft, collective exhale. Some grinned. Others just stared, eyes wide. The girl looked down at the glass in her hand, the weight of shame beginning to seep in. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned back to the security guard. "I'll need her escorted to the guest parking lot. Don't rush her. Just make sure she finds the exit." And then he walked away. Didn't wait for applause. Didn't need to watch her reaction. Because power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just walks calmly through its own front yard. But don't blink, because in part 6, the fallout from this moment won't just follow her. It will reach someone far more powerful. Someone she never meant to involve. The walk to the guest lot was quiet. No one shoved her. No one raised their voice. But somehow, the silence weighed more than any shouting match ever could. She clutched the half glass of whinnying to chill like it might keep her anchored. Her heels clicked against the stone path, suddenly sounding far too loud. The security guard kept a respectful distance behind her. But just as they reached the gravel lot, a sleek black coupe turned the corner. It wasn't fast. It didn't need to be. The driver's side window lowered, and the face that appeared made her stomach drop. "Dad," she breathed. The older man behind the wheel didn't get out. He simply stared at her, his jaw clenched, his eyes scanning the security guard, then the glass in her hand, and finally, the villa behind her. "I got a call," he said, voice tight, from board members, from clients, from the governor's office. Madeleine, her name, spoken like a sentence. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't realize it was him." He didn't flinch. "That's the problem." She took a step toward the car, lowering her voice. "It was a mistake. I was trying to protect the neighborhood." He looked. "Don't," he cut her off. "Every camera on that block saw you. Every phone picked it up. There's already a clip on Twitter with 60,000 views, and one from the woman across the fence. 72,000. Madeleine's breath hitched. "No names in the captions yet," her father added, "but that won't last long." The security guard looked away politely, pretending not to listen. She gripped the car door. "I'll explain. I'll apologize. I'll delete everything." He raised a hand. Too late. Then, for the first time, he looked disappointed. "I vouched for you, Madeleine. Pitched your charity board seat myself. Told them you were ready." She flinched. "I can fix this." "You can't." And just like that, he drove away. Not fast, not angry, just gone. She stood there, the sound of the engine fading, the wine glass trembling in her hand. Back up the hill, Marcus still sat beneath the olive tree, his eyes closed, face turned toward the sun, at peace. But the damage had already begun, because now the world knew, and the world had opinions. What she did next wasn't smart, wasn't strategic. It was pure desperation, and it would backfire in ways she couldn't imagine. Because next, Madeleine goes online and turns one private mistake into a public disaster. By morning, the storm had a name: Poolside Privilege. It started small clips shared between neighbors, snarky comments under the video, a few tweets with laughing emojis and captions like, "When you call the cops on the homeowner." But by 9 a.m., Madeleine had posted a Notes app screenshot. White background, black font, carefully curated damage control. "Yesterday's events were deeply misunderstood," she began. "I acted out of concern for the community. I regret that Mr. Cole felt uncomfortable. My intentions were never to cause harm." It was textbook, sanitized, safe, and utterly tone deaf. Because she didn't apologize for accusing him. She apologized for how he felt. Comments exploded. "You regret he felt uncomfortable. Girl, you called the cops. That's not an apology. That's PR. Imagine having that much audacity and zero accountability." It didn't help that someone had found her LinkedIn and her family name. Turns out, the Mr. Cole she called a trespasser had once underwritten her father's real estate expansion fund. Marcus Cole, founder, CEO, philanthropist, billionaire. The kind of man whose silence isn't submission but strategy. By noon, local news picked up the story, then a national blog. Then a verified journalist retweeted the clip with 3 words: "This is America." And then it went nuclear. Athletes, authors, celebrities, black entrepreneurs, everyone weighed in. Madeleine deleted her original post, but the screenshots lived on. And meanwhile, up on the hill, Marcus still hadn't said a word. Tanya Hill texted him at 3:45 p.m. "They're calling you the king of quiet clapbacks. Want to respond?" He didn't reply. Not then. But at 6:12 p.m., a single tweet appeared on his official account. No image, no hashtags. Just 7 words. "Silence only frightens those who fear truth." Retweets came by the thousands. Someone printed it on a t-shirt by sunset. But Madeleine? She was unraveling. She tried to message him privately. No response. She emailed Tanya's assistant. Blocked. And when she went live to explain everything, The internet didn't buy a word, because something had shifted, and for the first time, her last name wasn't protecting her. But what she didn't know, Marcus had already taken the next step, and it wouldn't just silence her. It would echo through every room she ever walked into again. Stick around, because next, he makes one phone call, and a door she thought was hers closes forever. The call lasted less than 4 minutes. No raised voices, no threats, just clarity. Marcus leaned back in the leather chair of his study, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on the horizon through the floor-to-ceiling glass. The city stretched far beyond the hills, oblivious. But in the quiet pulse of power, moves were already in motion. He tapped a number direct, unlisted. A woman answered, her voice bright, professional. "Mr. Cole." "Good evening, Elise," he said calmly. "I won't take much of your time." "Of course." He paused for half a beat. "I believe you're finalizing selections for the new Futures Fund board." There was a breath on the other end. Then, softly, "We are. Final interviews wrapped yesterday. I understand Madeline Langston was a candidate." "Yes, she was shortlisted. Her father's connections, well, you know how it is." "I do." Silenced heavy, but not hostile. "I'd ask that you remove her from consideration," Marcus said, quietly. No statement, no press. Another pause. "We assumed you might feel that way," Elise replied gently. "We saw the footage, and frankly so did our sponsors." "She's young," Marcus added. "Let her learn, but not under your banner. It'll be handled." He nodded once, and that was it. He didn't gloat, didn't even smile. He just ended the call, stood up, and walked to the balcony. Below him, the olive tree swayed in the evening breeze. Same one she had stood beneath days ago, accusing, arrogant, wrong. He didn't hate her, but this wasn't about her anymore. It was about the weight of moments, how one wrong one can echo into rooms you haven't entered yet. By midnight, the decision had been made. Madeline's name was quietly removed from the board's shortlist. The email thread was marked confidential, but someone always talks, and within 24 hours, the industry whispers began. "Langston girl blacklisted. No one wants that pure nightmare. She messed with the wrong man." But it didn't stop there, because the internet never sleeps. And while Marcus had chosen silence, the crowd had not. They began to dig, not out of malice, out of curiosity. And what they found wasn't just privilege. It was a past Madeline had worked very hard to bury. Next, I'll tell you what they uncovered. A forgotten video, one she never thought would resurface. And this time, she wouldn't walk away with a glass of wine. It started with a Reddit thread, just a blurry screenshot. A girl in a white blazer, standing on a high school debate stage, holding a trophy too large for her frame. The caption read, "That's her, right? Same girl from the pool thing." Someone replied, "Yep, I went to school with her. She's been like that forever." And then the video surfaced. A grainy, handheld phone recording from 8 years ago. Madeline, 17, standing in a school hallway, cornering a classmate with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You don't belong here," she said in the video. This program was for real scholars, not charity cases. The crowd online erupted. So it wasn't a what-time mistake. 8 years ago, same tone, same entitlement. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is her personality. Within hours, the clip went viral. The hashtags shifted from poolside privilege to pattern off hour. Even mainstream outlets began using the phrase. News anchors framed segments around it. "This isn't about one afternoon," one reporter said. "It's about a legacy of quiet exclusion." Loud only when recorded. Madeline's team scrambled. The apology notes were rewritten, peer firms circled. One agency reportedly walked away from her contract altogether. She deactivated comments, deleted posts, tried to reframe. But the internet didn't care about her rebranding. It cared about the pattern. And while all this played out, Marcus said nothing. But Tanya Hill didn't. At a charity gala that same weekend, a reporter asked her mid-interview, "Do you think Mr. Cole will ever respond directly?" Tanya took a sip of champagne, turned to the camera and smiled. "He already did," she said. "You just didn't understand the language." She walked away before they could ask more. That clip alone got 5 million views. And Madeleine? She watched it alone in a hotel suite, far from the city, her phone buzzing nonstop. The calls weren't from friends. They were from networks, producers, interviewers, crisis managers. She wasn't trending anymore because people liked her. She was trending because she had become a symbol. And symbols don't get to choose their narrative. So she made a decision. A last-ditch effort. She'd go live. National television. No script. Just her, a stool, and one chance to rewrite the story. But the moment those cameras turned on, the damage was already done. Because Marcus wouldn't be the one to dismantle her image. The world would. Next, I'll show you what happened during the broadcast, where the truth slipped not from Marcus's mouth, but from hers. And once it did, there was no coming back. The lights were too bright. The studio was colder than she expected. A sterile chill seeped into Madeleine's bones as she adjusted her posture on the stool. The host sat opposite her, calm, practiced, every word razor sharp beneath a velvet voice. "Thank you for joining us, Madeleine." She smiled tight, rehearsed. "Thank you for having me." A deep breath. Cue the redemption arc. "I want to begin by saying how deeply sorry I am for my actions. What happened at Mr. Cole's residence was a moment of poor judgment. I've had time to reflect, and I see now how my own biases shaped that moment." The host nodded. "Do you believe that moment was isolated or part of a larger pattern in your life?" A beat too long. "Well, you think we all carry unconscious bias," she answered carefully. "But I've always been someone who supports equality. I mean, my father donates to dozens of charities." The host's brow lifted, just slightly. "And what about your own history?" he asked. "There's a resurfaced video from your high school years that's now been viewed over 30 million times. Madeleine's jaw tensed. "That video was taken out of context," she said quickly. "We were kids. It was a heated moment, and I've grown since then." The host let the silence hang, then asked, softly, "Have you reached out to Mr. Cole directly?" Another pause. "I tried. I emailed, but I haven't heard back." "Would you say his silence has been unfair?" She hesitated, just long enough for the audience to lean in. "I think when someone has that much influence, staying silent can feel like a form of control," she said. There it was, a shift. The host blinked. "So, just to clarify, you believe the man you accused, whose property you trespassed, is now too powerful for you to fairly apologize to?" "No," she started, stumbling. "I just meant, it's intimidating when people turn someone into a martyr and ignore the pressure I'm under." A long pause, one so thick, even the studio lights felt heavier. And then came the slip. "Sometimes it feels like people are more interested in defending appearances than acknowledging how uncomfortable it is to watch someone like that stay so calm. It's calculated. Someone like that." She blinked, realized, too late. The internet didn't. They clipped the phrase in real time. The host moved on. The interview ended, but the damage, immediate. Samian liketh it. It trended within minutes. The phrase was memed, mocked, recontextualized, blasted across screens like a siren of who she really was beneath the PR polish. Madeleine left the studio in silence. No press outside, no fans, just a few cold stares from interns holding boom mix. But across town, Marcus Cole finally spoke. Not to a network, not to the press, to one journalist, in one room, on one condition. No camera, no edits, just his words. And what he revealed would make headlines no one saw coming. Stick with me because next, Marcus breaks his silence and redefines everything she thought she knew about power. The room was small, no stage, no lights, just 2 chairs, a recorder, and a pot of coffee untouched between them. Marcus sat across from the journalist, a woman named Corinne, late 40s, sharp eyes, soft tone. She'd interviewed him once before, 10 years back, when he launched his scholarship fund. Back then, he spoke in careful optimism. Today he spoke with gravity. She pressed record. "You stayed silent through all this," Karine said. "Some call it restraint, others, strategy." Marcus smiled faintly. "Silence makes people uncomfortable," he said, "especially those who are used to being heard first." She nodded. "Why now?" He paused. "Because the story stopped being about me a long time ago." Karine leaned in. "You mean the video, the backlash?" "I mean the idea that a man sitting by his own pool can still be mistaken for a threat because he doesn't fit the decor someone else expects." He looked past her, toward the window. Afternoon light stretched across the oak floor. "Warm but heavy. My father worked 3 jobs," he continued. "Never had a passport, never swam a day in his life. But he used to tell me, 'Boy, the world don't care how polite you are if they've already made up their mind.'" Karine stayed silent. "I learned early," Marcus said, "that respectability doesn't guarantee safety. But dignity? That's mine to keep. That's why I didn't shout, didn't tweet. I already knew who I was." She hesitated before asking, "Have you forgiven her?" He looked her in the eyes. "I don't need to." The silence between them deepened. "I'm not in the business of revenge," he said. "I'm in the business of legacy. I have minis watching, students watching, grandmothers watching, and not one of them needs me to drag anyone through the mud." He picked up the cold cup of coffee, took a slow sip. "What they need," he said softly, "is to know that grace can walk taller than ego." Karine's throat tightened. "You've become a symbol, Marcus." "I never wanted to be," he replied. "Symbols don't get to rest. I'm just a man who built a home, and one day, someone tried to evict me from it with a glance." He leaned forward slightly, "So I stayed seated until the world stood up." He didn't speak Madeleine's name. He didn't need to. And by the time the interview ended, the recorder was still warm from capturing what wasn't shouted but felt. That night, Karine published a piece titled, "The Man Who Sat Still." And what followed was something even Marcus didn't expect. Because next, the world responded, not with rage, but with art, with letters, with something deeper than headlines. And that is how his silence became the loudest sound in the room. They didn't build a statue. They didn't name a street after him. But in the weeks that followed, something quieter happened. In a small art school downtown, a group of students painted a mural on the side of an abandoned bakery. It wasn't Marcus's face. It was a pair of dark-skinned hands open, resting on the arms of a lounge chair, palms up. Above them, in clean gold script, "Grace doesn't flinch." Someone left flowers beneath it. Someone else left a folded towel, crisp and white. At a university on the East Coast, a literature professor began her seminar with a simple prompt. Discuss silence as resistance. Begin with Marcus Cole. Clips of his interview were shared in classrooms, churches, barbershops. But no one shouted his name. They just carried it, like a weight that reminded them how heavy things still were. Letters arrived, hundreds of them, some handwritten, others typed on yellowed keyboards in libraries. One came from a woman in Detroit who had once been followed in a store for browsing too confidently. Another came from a 12-year-old boy in New Orleans who wrote, "I want a chair like yours, one where I can sit and not feel scared." Marcus read each one, not all in one day. Some he read twice. But one stayed in his pocket. A letter from a retired carpenter in Alabama. "Mr. Cole," it said, "when I was your age, we built the fences. You reminded them that we also built the homes. Thank you for sitting still, so the rest of us could stand. No signature, just G." Marcus folded it carefully, slid it into the drawer of his study, and exhaled. One evening, weeks after it all began, he returned to the pool. Same hour, same chair. But this time, a second chair stood beside him, empty, waiting. He poured 2 glasses of lemon water, one for himself, the other. He didn't explain, just leaned back, let the last of the sunset drape across the water like silk. Because power isn't always volume. Sometimes it's stillness. Sometimes it's one man refusing to leave his own backyard. And sometimes it's the sound of a nation learning. to sit with its own silence and listen.